Welcome to Calm Mind English. Some days, you do not lose energy because the day is too hard. You lose energy because your mind starts arguing with itself before the day even begins. A simple morning can become heavy when every small action turns into a private debate. You stand in the kitchen with your phone in your hand. You know what would help you? You could drink water, open the curtains, wash your face, or begin the first small task. But another voice appears and says, maybe later. This is where the tiredness begins. It does not always begin with a big failure. It begins with a small conversation inside your mind. Should I get up now or stay here for 5 more minutes? Should I start working or check one message first? Should I clean this now or wait until I feel more ready? Each question feels small, but when you repeat these questions again and again, your mind becomes tired from managing itself. A person may look calm from the outside. They may sit quietly, drink coffee, and stare at the screen. But inside, they are spending a lot of energy trying to convince themselves to do what they already know they need to do. This is one reason a normal day can feel strangely exhausting. You may not have done much yet, but you have already argued with yourself many times. You argued about waking up. You argued about starting. You argued about what to do first. You argued about whether this task can wait. By the time the real work begins, part of your energy is already gone. Self-negotiation is not always loud. It can sound reasonable. It can say just 5 more minutes. It can say, I work better when I feel ready. It can say, I deserve a little comfort first. It can say, I will start after I check this one thing. Sometimes those thoughts are true. Rest matters. Comfort matters. Timing matters. But when the same pattern happens every day, the problem is no longer the one decision. The problem is the repeated debate. Imagine a person named Daniel. Every morning, Daniel wakes up with the same intention. He wants to start the day calmly. He wants to avoid his phone for the first few minutes. He wants to prepare his mind before work. But as soon as he opens his eyes, the negotiation begins. He tells himself, I should get up now. Then another thought answers, I'm still tired. He says, I should not check my phone. Another thought says, I will only check the time. Then the time becomes one message. One message becomes one short video. One short video becomes 20 minutes. After that, he feels behind before he even leaves the bed. The most painful part is that Daniel knows this pattern. He has seen it many times. So now the morning is not only about getting up. It also carries guilt from yesterday, frustration from last week, and fear that today will become the same. This makes a small action feel bigger than it is. Getting out of bed is not just getting out of bed anymore. It becomes a test of discipline. Starting work is not just starting work anymore. It becomes proof of whether he is improving or failing. When ordinary actions carry too much meaning, the mind resists them even more. This is why self-negotiation can become so tiring. You are not only choosing between 2 actions. You are carrying the emotional weight of your past choices. You are asking one small moment to decide something about your whole identity. But the truth is simpler. A delayed morning does not mean you are weak. A slow start does not mean you are broken. It only shows that your mind has built a habit of discussion before action. That habit can be changed. The first thing to understand is this. Your mind is not designed to enjoy effort at the beginning. It often prefers what is familiar, easy, and immediately comforting. So when you leave every action open for discussion, the easier option usually gets a stronger voice. This is not because the easier option is better. It is because it is more available. The phone is available. The bed is available. The old routine is available. The excuse is available. The comfortable delay is available. The useful action may also be available, but it often requires a moment of movement before it begins to feel natural. This is why the question, "Should I do it now?" is dangerous when you ask it too often. The question gives your mind permission to reopen the case. It turns a simple action into a decision. Then it invites every tired feeling, every excuse, every small discomfort, and every possible alternative into the room. Soon, you're not acting. You are reviewing. You review your mood. You review your energy. You review your schedule. You review whether this is the perfect moment. You review whether you can do it later. And while you review, the day moves forward. Many people think discipline means winning this inner argument every time. They imagine a strong person as someone who hears the voice of delay and defeats it with force. But in real life, the calmer path is often different. The strongest routine is not built by winning the same argument every morning. It is built by removing the argument. You do not need to ask if you will brush your teeth. You just do it because the action is already part of the structure of your day. You do not need to feel inspired to put on your shoes when you're leaving the house. The situation decides for you. This is the kind of discipline we're talking about here. Not dramatic discipline, not a hard, tense, emotional fight with yourself. A quieter discipline, the kind that reduces the number of decisions you have to make. When an action becomes a default, your mind does not need to negotiate as much. Think about a morning where the first step is already chosen. Not the whole day, just the first step. Maybe the first step is sitting up and placing both feet on the floor. Maybe it is drinking water before touching the phone. Maybe it is opening one document before checking messages. The action is small, but the effect is important. You are teaching your mind that not every moment needs a meeting. Not every feeling needs a vote. Not every small discomfort needs to become a discussion. There's peace in that. A life with fewer negotiations is not a life without freedom. It is a life where freedom is protected from constant mental noise. When you decide once and repeat gently, your mind can stop spending energy on the same question every day. This does not mean you become strict in a cold way. It means you become clear. Clear about the first step. Clear about the time. Clear about what happens when you do not feel like doing it. Clear about what is already decided. Because when everything is open, everything becomes tiring. And when a few important things are already decided, the day becomes lighter. You may still feel resistance. You may still feel slow. You may still have mornings when your mind reaches for comfort first. But the goal is not to become a person who never feels resistance. The goal is to stop treating resistance as a reason to restart the whole debate. You can notice the feeling and still follow the rule. You can feel tired and still begin the first small action. You can hear the voice of delay and still keep moving, without answering every argument it makes. This is where change begins, not in a perfect morning, not in a sudden new personality, but in one small moment where you stop asking, "Should I?" and begin following what you already chose when your mind was clear. That small shift can save more energy than you think, because many people are not exhausted only from doing too much. They are exhausted from deciding too much, questioning too much, and negotiating with themselves every day. Today, we begin by seeing that pattern clearly. The problem is not that you do not care. The problem is that your caring keeps getting trapped inside a daily argument. And the way forward is not to shout louder at yourself. It is to design your day so the argument has less room to grow. There is a hidden reason why the mind negotiates with itself so often. At first, it looks like laziness. You plan to start, but you did not start. You plan to exercise, but you stayed still. You plan to focus, but you open another tab. From the outside, it may seem like you simply chose the easier thing. But inside the mind, something more protective is happening. The mind often negotiates because it wants to avoid discomfort. It wants to keep you near what feels safe, familiar, and low risk. Even when the task is not dangerous, the mind may treat it as a small threat. A task can threaten comfort. It can threaten your sense of control. It can threaten your image of yourself. It can remind you that you might not do it perfectly, so the mind tries to delay the moment of contact. This is why a small task can create a surprising amount of resistance. You may only need to answer one email, clean one corner of the room, open one document, or begin one short workout. But before the action begins, the mind starts making offers. Maybe do it after lunch. Maybe prepare more first. Maybe wait until the mood is better. Maybe start tomorrow with a fresh mind. These offers can sound intelligent. They do not always sound like excuses. Sometimes they sound like planning. Sometimes they sound like self-care. Sometimes they sound like efficiency. But when the same offers appear every day, they're not helping you choose better. They're helping you avoid the uncomfortable beginning. The beginning is often the hardest part because it removes imagination. Before you start, the task can remain vague. It can stay in the future. You can imagine yourself doing it well later. You can still feel like the kind of person who will take care of it. But once you begin, reality appears. You see the blank page. You see the messy room. You see the weak first sentence. You see how stiff your body feels. You see that the task may require more patience than you hoped. Starting makes the task real. The mind knows this, so it sometimes protects your comfort by keeping the task imaginary. This is one reason self-negotiation can feel so convincing. It does not always say, avoid this forever. It says, avoid the real contact for a little longer. A little longer feels harmless, but a day is built from many little longers. A week is built from them too. Soon, a person does not only feel behind, they also begin to distrust themselves. They remember all the times they promised to start and then change the plan. The next time they make a promise, it feels weaker. This loss of self-trust is one of the quiet costs of daily negotiation. When you keep reopening decisions, your word to yourself becomes flexible. You may still have good intentions, but your mind learns that your plans are not final. They are only suggestions until comfort challenges them. Then comfort challenges them every day. This does not mean you need to punish yourself. Punishment usually makes the pattern worse. When you attack yourself for delaying, the task becomes even more emotionally loaded. Now, beginning the task also means facing shame. A calmer approach is more useful. You can start by seeing self-negotiation as a protective habit. It is not wise, but it is trying to help in a narrow way. It wants to reduce discomfort now. It does not think deeply about the cost later. This helps you respond with clarity instead of anger. When the mind says, maybe later, you do not need to hate that thought. You can understand what it is doing. It is trying to move you away from the first uncomfortable minute. That first minute matters. In many tasks, the first minute is not physically difficult. It is emotionally difficult because it breaks the comfort pattern. It asks your mind to leave the familiar state and enter a state of effort. A blank page is uncomfortable for a few minutes. Then words begin to appear. A cold floor is uncomfortable when you first stand up. Then the body adjusts. A messy desk feels unpleasant when you first look at it. Then one small object moves, and the mess becomes less powerful. The mind often overestimates the pain of beginning and underestimates the relief after beginning. So it negotiates. It tries to protect you from a discomfort that may be smaller and shorter than it claims. Think of someone sitting at a desk with a document open. The task is not huge. Maybe they only need to write one paragraph, but they stare at the screen and think, I need to get into the right state first. They check the time. They adjust the chair. They look for music. They open a browser to find one reference, then another. Then they feel the need for coffee. None of these actions look completely wrong, but together, They form a wall between the person and the first real sentence. The mind has created activity without contact. This is a common shape of self-negotiation. It keeps you near the task without letting you enter it. You feel busy enough to avoid guilt, but not focused enough to make progress. Over time, this creates mental heaviness. The task remains unfinished, so it stays in the background. Your mind keeps carrying it, even while doing other things. Part of you knows that you avoided the real beginning again. This background weight is often more tiring than the task itself. The solution is not to wait until the mind stops protecting comfort. It may not stop completely. The solution is to create a way to begin that is too small to debate. When the first step is small enough, the protective mind has less material to use. Do not ask, "Can I finish this today?" Ask, "Can I open the file and write the date?" Do not ask, "Can I clean the whole room?" Ask, "Can I remove 5 things from the floor?" Do not ask, "Can I become a disciplined person?" Ask, "Can I do the first action that my rule says comes next?" Small steps are not weak. They are a way to pass through the gate of resistance. Once movement begins, the mind receives new information. It sees that the action is survivable. It sees that discomfort is not danger. It sees that the beginning did not require a perfect mood. This is how self-trust begins to return, not through big promises, but through repeated contact with small actions. There's another important point. Your mind negotiates more when your plans are vague. If your plan is, "I should work on myself," the mind has too much room to argue. What does that mean? When should happen? How long should it take? What counts as enough? What if you're tired? A vague plan becomes an open courtroom. A clear plan becomes a door. At 7, I open the laptop and write one sentence. After dinner, I wash the dishes before sitting down. When I feel like checking my phone, I first stand up and drink water. These rules are not perfect, but they are concrete. They reduce the number of questions your mind can ask. This matters because the mind is skilled at finding gaps. If the rule is unclear, the mind enters the gap and begins to negotiate. It asks whether now is the right time, whether the mood is right, whether another task is more important. Clarity closes some of those gaps. You do not need many rules. Too many rules create another kind of burden. Start with one area where you negotiate the most. Choose one moment that repeats often. Then decide what the first action will be before that moment arrives. The decision should be made when you are calm. Do not wait until the tired moment to decide. In the tired moment, comfort has more power. Decide earlier when your mind is clearer. Then let the rule carry you when the mood becomes unstable. This is one of the quiet secrets of self-discipline. You do not become disciplined by depending on your strongest mood. You become more consistent by designing support for your weakest mood. Your strongest mood can make plans. Your weakest mood needs structure. Self-negotiation often happens because the weakest mood is asked to make decisions. It wakes up tired. It sits at the desk anxious. It comes home drained. Then you ask it to choose wisely among comfort, effort, escape, and responsibility. That is a difficult demand. A rule is a way of saying you do not have to decide now. This was already decided by a calmer version of you. That does not remove all discomfort, but it removes some confusion. And often, confusion is what gives delay its power. When you understand this, you can stop seeing every moment of resistance as a personal failure. You can see it as a predictable signal. The mind is trying to protect comfort. The task is becoming real. The first minute feels larger than it is. Then you can act with less drama. You can say, "This is the negotiation starting." And instead of entering the full conversation, you can return to the first small rule. The goal is not to silence every thought. The goal is to stop obeying every thought that tries to reopen. A decision you have already made. That is a major difference. You can hear the thought and still move. You can feel the desire to delay and still touch the task. You can understand the protective mind without letting it run the day. This is how the inner argument begins to lose strength. Not because you crushed it, but because you stopped feeding it with endless attention. A day can become tiring before anything difficult happens. This is because the mind is making choices all the time. Some choices are obvious. What should I eat? What should I wear? Which message should I answer first? When should I begin this task? Other choices are almost invisible. Should I keep scrolling or stop now? Should I reply now or later? Should I sit down or clean first? Should I start with the hard thing or the easy thing? Should I take a short break or push through? Each choice takes a small amount of mental energy. One choice is not the problem. The problem is the number of choices that repeat across the day. Decision fatigue is not always dramatic. It often feels like a quiet loss of mental sharpness. In the morning, you may feel capable. By afternoon, even a simple decision can feel annoying. By evening, the easiest option may win without much thought. This is why many people make choices at night that do not match their values in the morning. In the morning, they want a clean routine. At night, they order food they did not plan to order. They watch more than they wanted to watch. They delay sleep even though they are tired. They may think, why do I keep doing this? But often, the mind is not making a fresh, strong decision at night. It is making a tired decision after spending the whole day choosing, adjusting, reacting, and negotiating. A tired mind usually chooses relief. This is not a moral failure. It is a pattern. Imagine un normal weekday. You wake up and decide whether to get up now or stay in bed. Then you decide whether to check your phone. Then you decide what to eat. Then you decide what clothes to wear. Then you decide whether you have enough time to prepare calmly. Before work even begins, your mind has already made several small decisions. Then the day continues. You decide which task is most urgent. You decide whether to answer a message immediately. You decide how much attention to give to someone's tone. You decide whether to take a break. You decide whether to delay a difficult task. Each decision adds a little weight. By the time you reach the task that actually matters, you may not be lacking ability. You may be lacking clean mental energy. The task feels heavier because the mind is already crowded. This is why reducing choices can be more powerful than increasing motivation. Motivation asks, how can I feel more ready? Choice reduction asks, how can I make fewer unnecessary decisions? The second question is often more practical. You do not need to decide every morning where your keys go. They go in the same place. You do not need to decide every night where the charger is. It stays in the same place. These small systems protect mental energy. The same idea can apply to discipline. If you negotiate with yourself about exercise every day, choose a fixed trigger. After I brush my teeth in the evening, I put on walking shoes. The walk can be short. The important thing is that the decision is not reopened from zero. If you negotiate about studying, choose the same first step. I open the notebook and write one line before deciding anything else. The rule is not study perfectly. The rule is touch the material. If you negotiate about cleaning, choose one repeated action. After dinner, the dishes are handled before the chair becomes comfortable. Not because life must be strict, but because sitting down first often opens the door to negotiation. A tired mind is easier to guide with simple structure. There's a reason uniforms, routines, checklists, and fixed procedures exist in many serious fields. They reduce unnecessary choice. They allow attention to be used for the work itself instead of the preparation around the work. In daily life, you can use the same principle gently. You do not need to turn your life into a machine. You only need to notice where your mind wastes energy by deciding the same thing again and again. That is the key phrase. The same thing again and again. If a decision repeats every day, it may not need to remain a decision. It can become a default. A default is what happens unless there is a real reason to change it. For example, your default breakfast may be simple during workdays. Your default first work task may be the one you selected the night before. Your default phone location may be away from the bed. Your default response to low motivation may be a 2-minute start. Defaults do not remove freedom. They remove unnecessary friction. Freedom does not mean every small action must be reconsidered. That kind of freedom can become exhausting. Real freedom often comes from protecting your attention from low-value decisions. If you spend less energy choosing when to begin, you have more energy for the work itself. If you spend less energy arguing about whether to clean, you have more energy to clean for 10 minutes. If you spend less energy deciding whether to study, you have more energy to understand the first page. The mind works better when the path is clear. Think about walking through a room at night. If the floor is covered with objects, every step requires attention. You move slowly. You hesitate. You avoid one thing and step around another. Even crossing the room becomes tiring. But if the path is clear, you can walk without thinking much. A day is similar. When the day is full of tiny mental obstacles, the mind has to step around them. It decides, delays, compares, adjusts, and reconsiders. But when the path is prepared, action becomes less mentally expensive. This is why planning tomorrow's first action can be useful. Not planning the whole life. Not writing a perfect schedule. Just deciding what the first clear action will be. Before sleep, you write one sentence. Tomorrow, after I make coffee, I open the file and work for 10 minutes. That sentence may look small, but it removes a morning debate. You do not wake up and ask, what should I do first? You already know. Your only job is to follow the first line. The more tired you are, the more valuable this becomes. A tired mind does not need a complicated system. It needs fewer doors to choose from. This is also why too many options can weaken discipline. When you tell yourself, I can work anytime today, it sounds flexible. But for many people, any time becomes no time. The mind keeps moving the task to a better future moment. Morning becomes afternoon. Afternoon becomes evening. Evening becomes tomorrow. A fixed time may feel less flexible, but it gives the task a real place to live. When a task has no place, it follows you everywhere. It sits in the back of your mind while you eat. It follows you while you rest. It appears when you try to sleep. You may not be doing the task, but you're still carrying it. This is another hidden cost of open decisions. An unfinished decision takes space. A decided action takes less space, even if the action is still waiting. This does not mean every plan will work perfectly. Life changes. Children need attention. Work changes. The body gets tired. Some days will not follow the structure. But even then, a default helps. When the day breaks the plan, you do not need to rebuild your identity. You simply return to the default at the next reasonable point. The rule is not a prison. It is a home base. The mind feels safer when there is a home base. Without one, every disruption can turn into a full reset. One missed morning becomes a failed day. One delayed task becomes a reason to abandon the routine. One tired evening becomes proof that you cannot be consistent. That is too much meaning for one moment. A default helps you lower the drama. You missed the first time. Return it the second time. You skipped the long version. Do the short version. You lost focus. Touch the task again for 2 minutes. Simple return beats emotional restart. This is important because decision fatigue often creates all-or-nothing thinking. When the mind is tired, it wants simple categories: good day or bad day, success or failure, disciplined or lazy. But real life needs softer categories. A delayed start can still become a useful day. A short action can still protect the habit. A small return can still keep self-trust alive. The goal is to make the next useful action easier to choose. Sometimes that means reducing the number of choices before the difficult moment arrives. Sometimes it means preparing the space. Sometimes it means deciding the first step the night before. Sometimes it means using a rule so you do not need to ask your mood for permission. Your mood can give information, but it should not be the only manager of your day. If your mood is tired, the rule can guide you. If your mood is anxious, the first step can ground you. If your mood is bored, the default can keep the action alive long enough for attention to return. This is not about ignoring feelings. It is about not turning every feeling into a new decision. Feelings change many times in one day. If every change becomes a vote, your direction will keep changing too. A calmer system says, I can feel this, and still follow the next step. That sentence has strength. It does not fight the feeling. It does not insult the feeling. It simply refuses to let the feeling reopen every decision. When you reduce unnecessary decisions, you protect your mind from a kind of fatigue that many people do not notice. You stop spending energy on repeated questions. You create a clearer path. You make action less dependent on emotional weather. And over time, the day feels less like a series of battles. It starts to feel more like a path you already know how to walk. The most useful rule is simple enough to follow when you are tired. Many people create rules when they are motivated. The rules sound strong in that moment. Wake up at 5. Work for 3 hours. No phone at all. Exercise every day. Eat perfectly. Never delay again. The rule feels powerful because the mood is powerful. But when the mood changes, the rule collapses. This happens because the rule was designed for the best version of the person, not the real version who has long days, bad sleep, stress, family needs, distractions, and low-energy mornings. A good rule respects reality. It is not weak. It is usable. If you want to stop negotiating with yourself, you need rules that are clear, small, and repeatable. They should remove the need to debate, not create a new reason to feel guilty. A rule should answer 3 questions. When does it happen? What is the first action? What is the smallest acceptable version? For example, a vague intention says, I should read more. A usable rule says, after I sit with coffee. I read 1 page before checking my phone. A vague intention says, I need to clean the house. A usable rule says, after dinner. I clear the table and wash the dishes before sitting on the sofa. A vague intention says, I should stop wasting mornings. A usable rule says, when I wake up, both feet go on the floor before I touch the phone. The rule does not need to solve the whole day. It only needs to remove the first debate. The first debate matters because it sets the tone. If the day begins with negotiation, the mind learns that every action is open for discussion. If the day begins with a simple rule, the mind learns that some things are already decided. This gives the nervous system a quieter signal. You are not asking yourself to become a new person in one morning. You are asking yourself to follow one clear action. There is also a difference between a rule and a wish. A wish depends on feeling. A rule depends on placement in the day. I hope I feel focused tonight is a wish. After dinner, I sit at the desk for 10 minutes is a rule. I want to use my phone less is a wish. The phone charges outside the bedroom is a rule. I need to be more disciplined is a wish. When the timer starts, I work on one task until the timer ends is a rule. Wishes can inspire you, but rules carry you. This does not mean rules should be harsh. Harsh rules often create rebellion inside the mind. If the rule feels like a punishment, the mind will start negotiating against it. It will look for exceptions. It will say, "This is too much." It will turn the rule into another battle. A helpful rule feels firm but fair. It is specific enough to guide action, but small enough to survive a normal day. One of the best kinds of rules is the default first step. This means you do not decide the whole task. You only decide how every task begins. Writing begins by opening the document and writing one imperfect sentence. Studying begins by opening the book and reading the first paragraph aloud. Cleaning begins by picking up the first visible object. Exercise begins by putting on shoes. Work begins by closing extra tabs and naming the first task. These first steps may seem too small, but they're powerful because they cross the line between thinking and doing. Self-negotiation lives before the line. Once you cross the line, the mind has less room to talk. It can still complain, but now the body is already moving. The task is no longer a distant idea. It has become a present action. This is why the body can help the mind. You may not be able to think yourself into readiness, but you can sometimes move yourself into readiness. Stand up, open the file, put the item away, place the phone across the room, start the timer. The body begins and the mind often follows later. This is the opposite of waiting for the perfect mental state. Many people wait for readiness because they believe readiness should come before action. Sometimes it does, but often readiness appears after a small amount of action. You begin badly, slowly, or reluctantly. Then the mind adjusts. This is why the smallest acceptable version is important. On a strong day, you may work for 1 hour. On a weekday, you may work for 5 minutes. The rule stays alive because the smallest version still counts. This protects you from the all-or-nothing pattern. Without a small version, a tired day becomes a skipped day. A skipped day becomes guilt. Guilt becomes avoidance. Avoidance becomes more negotiation. A small version keeps the door open. It says, even today, I can stay connected to the habit. This connection matters more than intensity. For example, if your rule is to walk for 20 minutes, the smallest version may be putting on shoes and walking to the end of the street. If your rule is to study English, the smallest version may be reading 5 sentences. If your rule is to write, the smallest version may be 1 rough paragraph. The small version is not the final goal. It is the emergency bridge. It helps you cross tired days without breaking the routine completely. Another helpful rule is the no-second negotiation rule. The first thought may appear. That is normal. You may think, I do not feel like doing this. You may think, maybe later. You may think, this will be unpleasant. But after you notice the thought, you do not begin a second round of discussion. You return to the rule. The mind says, maybe later. You answer with action, not debate. You stand up. You open the file. You wash the first dish. You place the phone down. This is important because arguing with a thought can keep the thought alive. You try to convince yourself. Then the delaying voice answers. Then you make another argument. Then it answers again. Soon, you are spending energy on a conversation that does not produce movement. Action ends more arguments than reasoning does. Not always immediately, but often enough to matter. A rule can also be tied to an existing habit. This is useful because the existing habit becomes the anchor. After brushing my teeth, I prepare tomorrow's clothes. After making coffee, I open my planner. After lunch, I walk for 5 minutes. After closing the laptop, I clear the desk. After putting the children to bed, I prepare one thing for tomorrow morning. The anchor reduces the need to remember. The day itself reminds you. This is different from relying only on motivation. Motivation is unstable. Memory is also unstable when life is busy. But anchors are already part of the day. They give the new action a place. The simpler the rule, the easier it is for the mind to accept. A rule with too many conditions becomes another negotiation. I will work out if I slept well, if the weather is good, if I have enough time, if I feel focused, and if nothing else happens. This may sound realistic, but it gives the mind many exit doors. A cleaner rule has fewer doors. After work, I change clothes and walk for 10 minutes. If the weather is bad, I walk inside. If I'm tired, I walk for 3 minutes. Now the mind knows what to do. The rules should also be visible when possible. A notebook on the desk, shoes near the door, a glass beside the sink, a written line on the wall, a phone placed outside the bedroom. These simple cues reduce the need to remember the rule internally. Your environment can hold part of the discipline for you. This matters because the mind is not always reliable under pressure. It forgets what it wanted. It follows what is easiest. It moves toward what is visible. So make the rule visible. Make the first action easy to touch. Make the escape option slightly less convenient. This is not manipulation. It is design. You are designing for the real human mind, not an imaginary mind that always makes noble choices. A rule also becomes stronger when it is repeated without emotional review. This means you do not analyze your whole personality every time the rule feels hard. You do not ask, why am I like this? You do not turn a low-energy moment into a deep identity judgment. You simply follow the smallest version. Some days, that is enough. Discipline becomes calmer when it is less dramatic. You do the action because it is the next step, not because you feel inspired, guilty, afraid, or heroic. This is the beauty of automation. The action becomes ordinary, and ordinary actions are easier to repeat. A person who stops negotiating with themselves does not necessarily have more willpower than everyone else. They may simply have fewer open decisions. They may have a clearer first step. They may have designed their routine, so the useful action appears before the comfortable escape. This is available to you too. Start with one repeated moment. Choose the moment where the negotiation costs you the most energy. Then create one clear rule. Make it small. Make it visible. Connect it to something that already happens. Decide the smallest acceptable version. Then practice returning to it without a long inner discussion. At first, the mind may still argue. That is normal. It has practiced negotiation for a long time. But every time you follow the rule without entering the full debate, you teach the mind a new pattern. The question does not need to be reopened. The first step is already chosen. And when the first step is already chosen, beginning becomes lighter. A room can make discipline easier or harder. This is easy to underestimate. Many people think self-discipline happens only inside the mind. They focus on thoughts, motivation, willpower, and attitude. These things matter, but the physical space around you also speaks to your behavior. A phone beside the bed says, "Touch me first." A clear glass near the sink says, "Drink water." A messy desk says, "Delay this." An open notebook says, "Begin here." Your space gives instructions quietly. If the room is designed for comfort, escape, and distraction, the mind will negotiate more. It has to fight what the environment is offering. It has to say no to what is easy and visible. That takes energy. If the room is designed for the action you want, the mind does not need to fight as much. The useful behavior becomes easier to enter. This is not about creating a perfect room. Most people do not have perfect space. They may share a home. They may have children. They may work in a small area. They may live with noise, clutter, or limited time. The goal is not perfection. The goal is friction. Friction means the amount of effort required to start or avoid an action. If the desired action has too much friction, you will negotiate. If the escape action has no friction, you will slide into it. Think about the phone again. When the phone is beside you, checking it requires almost no effort. Your hand moves before your mind fully decides. The screen opens. The day begins through someone else's messages, images, opinions, and problems. Then your own first action feels further away. But if the phone is across the room, the action changes. You must stand up. You must cross the room. That small friction gives your mind one extra moment. It does not solve everything, but it changes the pattern. A few steps can protect a few minutes. A few minutes can protect the morning. This is how environment works. It does not need to be dramatic. It works through small physical details repeated often. If you want to read, leave the book where your hand usually reaches for the phone. If you want to walk, place your shoes where you can see them. If you want to work, clear one small part of the desk before sleep. If you want to reduce snacking, do not leave the easiest snacks at eye level. If you want to sleep earlier, make the bed area less connected to screens. Each change changes the first move. The first move matters because habits often begin before conscious thought becomes strong. You do not always choose with a clear mind. Sometimes you choose with your hands, your eyes, and your surroundings. You follow the object that is closest. You enter the path that is already open. So open the path you want. Close the path you keep regretting. Again, this does not mean forcing yourself harshly. It means respecting how human behavior works. A person who keeps a guitar on a stand may practice more than a person who keeps it in a case under the bed. The difference is not only passion. The difference is access. A person who leaves workout clothes ready may move sooner than a person who has to search for them. The difference is not only discipline. The difference is preparation. A person who starts work with a clean desk may focus faster than a person who begins by sorting old cups, papers, chargers, and random objects. The difference is not only character. The difference is friction. Friction shapes behavior. One useful exercise is to look at your space honestly and ask two questions. What behavior does this space make easy? What behavior does this space make difficult? Do not judge yourself while asking. Just observe. Maybe your bedroom makes phone use easy and waking up calmly difficult. Maybe your desk makes distraction easy and focused work difficult. Maybe your kitchen makes random snacking easy and simple meals difficult. Maybe your living room makes watching easy and stretching difficult. This observation can feel uncomfortable, but it is practical. It turns discipline from a personal battle into a design problem. Design problems can be adjusted. If the desk feels heavy, remove everything except what supports the first task. If the phone steals the morning, change where it sleeps. If the sofa pulls you into delay after dinner, place one required object in the path before the sofa. Maybe the dishcloth, maybe the notebook, maybe the walking shoes. If the task is invisible, make the first step visible. The point is to help the desired action greet you before the escape action does. Many people try to use their mind to overcome a poorly designed environment. They sit in the middle of distractions and tell themselves to focus. They keep temptations close and tell themselves to be strong. They leave tasks unclear and tell themselves to begin easily. This creates unnecessary struggle. It is better to remove some of the struggle before it begins. There is also an emotional side to environment. A cluttered space can make the mind feel that the day is already behind. The task may be small, but the room gives a feeling of unfinished life. This can increase self-negotiation because the mind does not know where to start. When everything calls for attention, attention becomes thin. So choose one small zone, not the whole house, not the whole room. One zone, a starting zone. It may be one corner of the desk, one chair, one small table, one part of the kitchen counter. one place near the door. Keep this zone connected to the action you want to repeat. If it is for writing, leave the notebook there. If it is for study, leave the book and pen there. If it is for morning calm, leave water and a simple note there. If it is for exercise, leave the shoes and clothes there. This zone becomes a physical promise. When you see it, the mind does not need to invent the next step. The space shows it. This is especially helpful on tired days. On a tired day, you may not have the mental energy to plan, but you can still follow a visible cue. You can sit in the chair. You can open the notebook. You can put on the shoes. You can wash the cup that is already in your hand. The space reduces the need for inner speech. That is important because self-negotiation is often made of too much inner speech. The mind talks and talks, trying to decide, justify, avoid, and restart. A well-designed environment gives the body something clear to do before the talking grows. There's another part of environmental design: remove false choices. If you keep 10 possible tasks in front of you, your mind may spend the first part of the work session deciding which one to do. If you keep only one visible task, the decision is easier. If you have many apps open, every tab becomes an invitation. If you close them before work begins, there's less to resist. If your phone has every notification turned on, each sound becomes a decision. If the phone is silent during the first work block, there are fewer interruptions to negotiate with. Your attention is easier to protect before it is broken. Once attention is broken, you have to spend energy returning. Then returning becomes another negotiation. Should I go back now? Should I finish watching this? Should I answer this first? Should I restart later? Protecting attention early is easier than rescuing it repeatedly. This is why simple boundaries help. A boundary can be physical, like a closed laptop after a certain time. It can be spatial, like no phone on the bed. It can be visual, like only one task on the desk. It can be temporal, like no messages before the first work block. These boundaries are not meant to make life rigid. They are meant to reduce the number of moments where your mind has to decide again. The less you negotiate with your environment, the less you negotiate with yourself. A useful space does not have to be beautiful. It has to be honest. It has to support the behavior you actually want. Sometimes the best change is simple. Put the phone in another room. Prepare the clothes. Clear the desk. Place the book open. Put the water where you will see it. Remove the object that keeps pulling you into delay. Small physical changes can create large mental relief, because now the mind does not need to carry the whole routine alone. The room carries part of it. The objects carry part of it. The path carries part of it. And when the path is easier, discipline becomes less dependent on force. You begin to understand that self-control is not only a thought, it is also a layout. It is the distance between your hand and your phone. It is the visibility of your first task. It is the ease of the next useful movement. When you change the space, you change the conversation. The mind has fewer reasons to argue. The body has clearer signals to follow. The first step becomes closer, and sometimes that is enough to begin. The quiet goal is not to become a person who never feels resistance. Resistance will still appear. Some mornings will feel slow. Some tasks will still feel unpleasant. Some evenings will still bring the old desire to escape into comfort. This is normal. The real goal is to stop turning every resistance into a negotiation. A feeling can appear without becoming a command. You can feel tired and still open the file. You can feel uncertain and still wash the first dish. You can feel bored and still read one page. You can feel unmotivated and still follow the rule you already chose. This is where discipline becomes calmer. Many people imagine discipline as pressure. They think they must push harder, speak to themselves more harshly, or create bigger consequences. But for daily life, pressure is not always the best tool. Pressure can create action for a short time, but it can also create tension, avoidance, and exhaustion. A quieter kind of discipline is based on reducing inner conversation. You decide once when your mind is clear. Then you follow the decision when your mood is unclear. That is the simple pattern. Decide once. Follow gently. Return quickly. This pattern is not exciting, but it is strong. It does not require you to wake up with a perfect feeling. It does not require you to defeat every excuse with a speech. It does not require you to become someone who never wants comfort. It only asks you to build a small structure and trust it long enough to repeat it. At first, the mind may resist the structure. It may say the rule is too small. It may say the rule is not enough. It may say you need a better plan before starting. It may say you already failed because you did not follow it perfectly yesterday. These thoughts are part of the old negotiation pattern. They try to pull you back into discussion. But you do not need to answer every thought. You can notice the thought and return to the next action. This is a different relationship with the mind. Instead of treating every thought like an instruction, you treat some thoughts like background noise. They may be present, but they do not decide the next step. A person who lives this way is not emotionless. They may feel many things. The difference is that their feelings do not automatically reopen every decision. This creates mental space. When the daily argument becomes smaller, the day feels lighter. You have more attention for the task itself. You have more patience for real problems. You have more energy for people around you. You're no longer spending so much strength trying to persuade yourself to begin. Beginning becomes ordinary. There is a deep relief in ordinary beginning. You wake up and follow the first step. You sit down and open the work. You finish dinner and clean the first thing. You feel the old delay rising, but you do not build a whole conversation around it. You simply move. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just clearly. This is how self-trust grows. Self-trust does not come from promising yourself a completely different life. It comes from watching yourself keep small decisions. It comes from seeing that your word has weight. It comes from learning that even when your mood changes, you can still return. Every small return matters. When you return after 5 minutes of distraction, you teach your mind that distraction does not need to end the session. When you return after a slow morning, you teach your mind that a slow start does not need to ruin the day. When you return after missing a habit yesterday, you teach your mind that one missed day is not a full collapse. This is important because many people lose discipline through emotional interpretation. They do not only miss one action, they turn the missed action into a story. I always fail. I never stay consistent. I cannot trust myself. There is no point starting again. That story is often more damaging than the missed action itself. A calmer response is shorter. I missed it. I return now. That is enough. You do not need a long punishment. You do not need a new identity analysis. You do not need to make the next step bigger to compensate. Just return to the smallest useful action. This is how you prevent one slip from becoming a pattern. The mind loves dramatic resets. It says, tomorrow I will do everything properly. Next week I will start fresh. This time I will change completely. But dramatic resets often create dramatic pressure. Then pressure creates fear. Fear creates delay. Delay creates another reset. A small return breaks that cycle. It says, I do not need to wait for a clean beginning. I can continue from here. This is especially useful in real life because real life is rarely clean. The day may be interrupted. The house may be noisy. The schedule may change. Your energy may be lower than expected. You may not have the perfect block of time. If your discipline only works under perfect conditions, it will not work often. So build a discipline that works under normal conditions. A normal day has interruptions. A normal mind has resistance. A normal body gets tired. A normal routine sometimes bends. Your system should be able to bend without breaking. This means your rules need a small version. Your environment needs to support easy return. Your mindset needs to stop treating every imperfect moment as a final judgment. Then you can keep moving without needing to feel proud every time. Some days, the action will feel meaningful. Some days, it will feel plain. Some days, it will feel annoying. Let it be plain. Let it be ordinary. Let it be done without making it a big emotional event. This is how habits become stable. They stop needing attention all the time. The action becomes part of the day, like washing your hands, locking the door, or putting on shoes. You do not have to feel inspired. You just follow the path. There's freedom in this. A person who negotiates with themselves all day may appear free, because they can choose again and again. But inside, they may feel trapped by the constant choosing. Every small action becomes a debate. Every feeling becomes a reason to change direction. A person with clear defaults may appear less flexible, but inside, they often feel more peaceful. They have fewer daily arguments. Their energy is not scattered across repeated decisions. They know how to begin. This is not about controlling every part of life. It is about protecting the parts that matter. You may choose to make your morning simpler because the morning shapes your attention. You may choose to make your work start clearer, because starting is where you lose the most time. You may choose to make your evening routine lighter, because evening tiredness makes negotiation stronger. You may choose to make your phone less available, because it keeps becoming the first escape. These choices are not small in the long run. They change the way your day speaks to your mind. A day with clear first steps says, you do not need to argue now. A room with fewer distractions says, begin here. A rule with a small version says, even today, you can stay connected. A quick return says, this moment is not ruined. Together, these signals create a different life. Not a perfect life, a less noisy one. You still have responsibilities. You still have hard days. You still have tasks you do not enjoy. But you're no longer adding a private debate to every action. That is a real form of rest. Not rest from effort, but rest from unnecessary inner conflict. When you stop negotiating with yourself every day, you do not lose your freedom. You recover your energy. You free your attention from repeated questions. You give your future self a clearer path to follow. The next time the debate begins, listen for it. Maybe it says, should I start now? Maybe it says, maybe later. Maybe it says, I need to feel ready first. Do not turn this into a fight. Do not make it dramatic. Just look at the first small rule. Then follow the smallest useful step. Open a document. Put the phone down. Stand up. Wash the cup. Read the first line. Put on the shoes. Let the action be simple. There is no need to prove your whole life in one moment. There is no need to win a grand battle inside your mind. There is only the next small step that has already been chosen. A quiet room, a clear desk, a phone resting out of reach, a pair of shoes waiting by the door. One small rule, followed without a long debate. That is enough for this moment. And sometimes, one moment without negotiation is where a steadier life begins.